Hi, it's Pete the Bumbling Modeler back again. So we're back onto the build of this Suzuki RGB500 Grand Prix bike. I've done some bits and pieces off camera, obviously, because the last two builds were relatively simple. This is quite a complicated one, so I don't think you'll necessarily appreciate seeing every little thing I do. So I'll just explain key points as I go along so you can follow along with what we're doing. Bit of an apology to make before I start. Once I put a video up, I tend not to look at it because I don't like the sound of my own voice, and I haven't really been paying attention. And I thought I had one subscriber. It turns out I've got 5. So for you other 4 I haven't thanked, thanks for your support. I really appreciate it. I didn't get any email notifications this time. When I got the first subscriber, I got an email saying someone has joined your site, server, whatever they call it. I didn't with the other 4 of you, so yeah, sorry about that. I now know you're here, and thanks for your support. But I say I only found out by accident this morning, so I feel quite bad about that. Right, where we left off is we were waiting for some bits and pieces to arrive so I could start putting things together. And these were predominantly some nuts and bolts of some nice little hex-headed dome bolts and hex-headed flange bolts and some little dome bolts. They arrived just after I finished filming, along with these rivets here. As I'm talking now, you'll see something up here somewhere, little up here, there, with a close-up still of these so you can see what we're talking about. It's all a bit tiny. These ones were a little bit pricey because they're actually turned steel. But where I want to use those is, I should have everything in that hand, shouldn't I? Round the fairing here where the screen joins, I think it's nice to have nice shiny metal bolts there because your eye's really drawn to that area because you tend to be looking towards the handlebars and speedometer. So we'll drill those into them at a later date. And then the other ones I bought were these ones, which are a 3D printed resin bolt. And again, somewhere up here, you'll have a close-up of what they look like. So what I've done off camera is masked off a big chunk of them, sprayed them black, then sprayed them a MRP metallic steel colour to keep that metallic sheen. It's not going to look different to the background of the bike. Part of it's just so you get a nice crisp bolt detail when you touch it up. So the plan is to use those all over this little engine block. So there's bolts missing on these flanges which hold the carburetors on, so I'll be able to dab a few on there. Things like that, some bolt, I can drill one into that one. It's basically all over, just to add a little bit of visual interest. The colour won't be dramatically different, as I say. And the other place I wanted to use them, as I said before, was on these, oh, that's one I've done, that's the example, on these cylinder heads, because although they're relatively well detailed, the ones that are on there, that's going to be painted in aluminium colour. If I blob a bit of silver on there, it's chances are it's going to be on the head and it's going to look a bit of a mess. So to try and keep it neat and tidy, I'm going to shave those bolts off, which I have on this here particular head. Shave those off, drill out the holes, drop a little flange. This will come out obviously when I paint it and go back in later on. Drop a little flange bolt in there, then we'll have a nice clean demarcation. The colour won't be dramatically different. That's going to be a dull aluminium colour, to be honest, so it might not stand out, but what you won't get is any paint overrun. So in a minute I'll show you how I did that on one of the other cylinder heads, but I'll do most of it off camera just because physically seeing it is a bit of a pain. And again, there's this bit that goes up under the sump. There's the indication of bolts there, but they're not really that detailed, so we'll put some little hex heads or button heads in there. Now again, I'll put a close-up of this on the screen while I'm talking, but Tamiya have moulded this, and I don't know if it's an accident or whether it's a shrinkage, but there's a little dent in the middle of each one of those bolts, dead center, which means you can just go in with a pin on the end of a craft knife, get it in that dent, give it a push to make it deeper, and then you've got somewhere as a pilot for your drill to start. So it's quite handy that's there, so it'll save any messing about. So off camera, say the crankcase is glued, 4 parts, 1, 2, 3 and 4, all slots together as you'd expect. The only problem I had was there's a slight gap down here, so I've inserted a bit of plastic card in there. Filling it wouldn't really have worked too well because it would have kept shrinking. So what I'll do before I spray is carve away that plastic card. I've only glued it onto one face, and then that'll make that nearer invisible. It won't ever be completely invisible, but it'll be closer than that because it'll be hidden by all these webs. But the gaping hole looked bad. We've got a seam on the back we have to deal with. Again, this would have been a split crankcase to get the two halves together. I don't know, it would have been split down the center or split that way. I really don't know on this bike. But either way, that doesn't look brilliant. So I'm going to use a bit of super glue and talc on that and then file it back. And I'll show you how I do that as we go. What else have we got to say? Frame wise, I'm going to carve some bits off. This little brake actuator there, that'll be a little bit of stainless steel rod put in that one. And I've said before, the more you build models, the cheaper it becomes. So I've got here, I'll just drag some off. This isn't the stuff I'll be using, but I've got packets and packets of bits of rod and tube from various projects that build, because you buy the minimum order quantity and you end up with a lot left over. So as you go, you end up with this collection of materials. That's quite a nice way of doing things. So these coils will come off. I've seen photos of aluminium on the normal bike, so we can cut them off. And to that end, for this, I bought some aluminium rod from eBay, 3mm diameter rod. I'm quite lucky that I've got access to a lathe actually, so I can. It's not far off the right diameter, but I can turn that down to the size I want. I mean, replace metallic bits with metal, which is always going to look better, really. You can, if you're careful, adjust the size of this by putting it in a drill chuck and holding a file against it. So if you haven't got access to a lathe and you want to try playing around with various sizes, you can, but just buy the closest size to what you need. That, again, when I'm talking about money, I feel quite self-conscious because I realise not a lot of people have got money. I'm relatively lucky that my kids have left home, the mortgage is going down, and at a phase of life where me and my wife can spend money on hobbies because we've both got reasonable jobs. So when I'm saying this is only £7, please don't take offence if you don't know the word only. I know £7 is a lot of money. It's a couple of nights food for some people, but for me, I can afford to do that. And again, that's £7. What am I getting? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 lengths of aluminium. That'll last me a lifetime, and I'll probably end up giving half that away to a friend who does similar things to me, because I'll never use it all rather than sitting there. So yeah, that'll be a bit of detail we add. The other thing I need to change is this thing here is the gas pressure bottle for the adjustable rear shock absorber. It's a single shock absorber that goes down here. Painting the frame black and that an aluminium colour is never going to look neat, so I'll shave that off completely. Actually, what I'll do now on camera, so I've got a reference of it, is so I can get the position right later on. If I do this now on camera, I won't lose the footage when so that the end of that wants to be, looks like 7.5mm from that frame. So I've only just done that for my own reference, sorry. So we'll carve this off, polish that back so we got a nice round tube, make an aluminium one of those, pop that on there, and then that'll look a lot neater when we've finished the job. So it's little things like that at the moment, making little bits and pieces and doohickeys for it. So that's where we are. I said I'd do this bit, so let's try doing this one. So how I've done the bolt heads on the cylinder head is I've got, ooh, sorry, this is why I can't do it on camera. I've got a scalpel there. I'm just going to gently nibble away. Until I get a flat surface. Get my pin and center that. I'm going to do this off camera and make a little dent because I have to get in really close and I can't really see what I'm doing with the camera there. Sorry. Right, so I've gone in, I've marked the center of that bolt by eye. I've got a really, that's a 0.3 drill bit, and I've gone into that center and just started to open it up, so I've got a slightly bigger hole to work with. It's all, I say, it's awkward doing this on camera, so you won't see a lot of this. There's going to be an afternoon of putting bolt heads in really and spraying things aluminium, that sort of malarkey. But it's just, yeah, I'd like to show you as much as I can, but then you probably won't want to watch anyway. Now, this is a 0.7mm PCB bit. These are really, really cheap on eBay, Chinese things. I'm using it because I haven't got a 0.7mm twist drill at the moment and I want to get going. They're not ideal. Firstly, the carbide, so that'll snap really, really easy. They're ever so brittle. But also they're quite a coarse spiral because it's meant to be used in a machine. So that'll pull through like a screw thread really rapidly. So you have to have your wits about you. I'd never use a power tool doing this on this plastic because the chances are you'll melt it. But you'll see when this goes in, it will really drag itself into the plastic, but we'll give it a go. So we line it up with our little hole, get it as square as we can, gently twist. Now with a normal twist drill, if you're going off line, that feels horrible. I might go through with all the way through with the 0.3. When it goes offline, you've got a bit of leeway and move things around to straighten up. With those carbide ones, they just snap right away. So well, now that's gone right through, it might be a bit easier. I'd recommend using twist drills. I use these microbox ones. Over the years, they've got lost, split and broken. I do need to buy a new box of them. Be careful. You see cheap ones on eBay, which are pretty crap. They look like this, but they're not that well ground. These ones come from, I don't know. I'll find out and put the link on the video. The name's on the tip of my tongue, but these are proper drill bits that ground at the right angle. The cheap ones you see on eBay are pretty poor, so they're about 10 or 12 quid, but they will last you. Whereas the eBay ones, half of them won't drill and they're about 3 or 4 quid. So if you see a really cheap thing, you get what you pay for and don't. But with that drill right through, this might feel a little bit nicer. But you can see it's pulling through an angle as well. You can see it's pulling itself in rather than drilling, so it'll go right down to the shaft of the drill and then spin free. So there you go. It doesn't drill as nicely as those, although they are cheap, but the chances of snapping them are quite high. So that's how I was drilling out for the bolts. So you just shave off, mark a center, pilot drill, then get one of our, actually I'll not get another one off because I've just got enough sprayed up for the heads. You use far more of these things than you think. Let's take the one out of that one and see how it inserts. So when these are sprayed and it's come to put in properly, you put a little blob of white glue or super glue on that, just get it in a hole, give it a little shove, and then you've got a nice little bolt head in there. So that's what I'll be doing on those for the next hour or so. Things like the clutch cover, again, no bolt details, so we'll just drill those out and put some little hex bolts in that. The clutch itself, because I'm not a masochist, when the cover's on, you can see that bolt, and potentially that one. So I'll just replace those three. If you can't see them, there seems a little point in replacing them, because every time you drill one, you've got a chance of stuffing up. And another place is around these little carb covers here for the disc valves. I'll put those little button head ones there. I might not drill them, might just glue the heads on, we'll see. Now to get these off, I've never used them before, this is as I've found out myself. If you want a row of bolts off, and you will need better side cutters than the ones I was using last time, by the way. You need these Tamiya ones really to do this. The other ones are a bit crude. You just snip that there. Snip up there. You get a whole row of bolts off. On the end of it tells you the size of the bolt head, and then you just pinch the ones you want off like that. So it's quite easy to deal with. In the past, I've used, and this is going back to what I said about never throw anything out of these, so think the hobby becomes cheaper the more you save. But in the past, I've used these master bolt resin ones, and they're nice little bolts, and they're really good. The only thing is, painting them, you have to, well, I was drilling a hole in a coffee stirrer, inserting a load of them, spraying them. The fact that these come on a raft, so they're already in place, all you have to do is spray, does make things life a lot easier. But yeah, these are just as good as those visually on a model when they're finished. It's just they're a bit more of a pain to deal with. So that was that. So what we covered, we're going to alter bits on the frame. We can deal with that later on. Next time you see the engine, the block, I'll be sprayed a magnesium colour. That's fine. I'll get the cylinder heads together, and these, I didn't show you those seams actually. These will be sprayed aluminium, as will the heads. This will be sprayed aluminium, and we'll start to get the block together so you can see what the model's going to look like. Hopefully I'll add that as a little bit on the end of this so we can get enough done today. With regard to cleaning up these seams, I found a bit of a bargain that you might be I found a bit of a bargain, put it on my desk and lost a bit of a bargain. There's a company called Ultimate Modeling Products to sell sanders, primers, modeling tools, 3D printed tool holders, that sort of thing. Now I noticed on their website they had a mystery box for, I think at the time it was £14. They do 3 different levels, but the £14 one gives you 3D printed tool holders and bits and pieces that have gone wrong for them. So they can't sell them as a premium product because there's been a problem with the print, or there's a bit of a snaggy bit on it, and they're all perfectly fine. They're usable, they're just not. Sanding sticks, which should have their logo printed on, which it's been missed out in the printing process. So again, they can't sell them as a premium product, and a few other bits and pieces. So they're throwing all these shop seconds into a mystery box for a tenner, or 14 quid, sorry, and you get you get quite a lot of goodies for next to nothing. So I chucked in my money to see what I'll get. It's different every time, so don't, because I said I've got these, don't rely on getting those. But I ended up with this 3D printed paint holder, which I can't actually see what's wrong with it, but it is. But I use 3 different blacks as a rule. I use the LP5, lacquer satin black, rubber black, and German grey. Those are 3 predominant black colours for wearing things up. So it's nice to have them in a little stand on their own. I've got a big heap of these polishing sticks, which are really, really nice actually, because I can't get hold of the ones I used to use anymore. They're out of production. Got a bag of Haribo, and I got some primer, which I think is Rebottle's Style Res, the Ultimate Primer, but I don't know, don't count me on that. So yeah, I'll put a link in below for that if you want to take a chance and you've got the spare 15 quid lying around, see what you get. It worked out for me. I ended up with loads of little bits and pieces I can try out that I wouldn't normally buy. But we're digressing. So what we did with the cylinders, glued together with the contactor rather than my usual Tamiya extra thin. That way you get a good bead, and when you squeeze them together you get that little bead of cement. Because that little bead of cement comes out, it's just a case of sanding back, then polishing back with these, which is why I like them, and that seam disappears without any filler, because the plastic acts its own filler. So they're together, and I say all these things I did when I was watching telly the other night, from the telly. So we're a long way into making this look like an engine block. So yeah, I'll crack on with that. The other bit I've noticed, actually, just because I can't shut up, and again I'll put a picture up here somewhere so you can see this. I don't know if it's by accident or by design. This little bit here, I think, is probably a water pump. Sits at the bottom of the sump there, and the bolts for are just little round blobs. They're not massively detailed, but when you look close, whether by accident design, there's a little dent in the center of those, and I think it might be just where the plastic shrunk after it's molded. Because you got the little dent though, it makes it easy just to line up your pin in your handle and just center punch those, so you can make a little dent to put bolts in there, so we can replace the bolts on those quite easy without faffing about too much with the centering. So that'll all be done next time you see it, and that's basically where we're at. So I'll probably get all this painted up now when I've got it ready for the various bits and pieces on it. Get the cylinders on there, get them tied up, make sure they all fit, and then come back and give it a little bit of a recap on the end of this video, just to see where we are with that. But right now I'm going to switch off, see what I've said, see what's worth listening to, what's not, and then we'll take it from there. So thanks for watching so far, and I'll be back. Hi, we're back to the next little bit of this. So that bit of white plastic I used to infill, that gap's been carved, so that'll blend in quite well when it's primed. There's little holes all over this engine case now, all around these bits. I don't know if you can pick up on those. They'll have the little bolt heads installed in them later on. Then we've got the ancillary bits like the clutch cover. I've drilled a hole in the top there, not for a bolt as such, but there should be a little lever on there that operates a clutch, so we'll have to make one of those. It doesn't come with the kit, so we need a bit of scrap aluminium or something just to do that, and that's just to remind me to drop it in the hole. Cylinder heads are done, generator thing's done, the sides of the cylinders have been polished back, so they're all ready. When I do come to prime it, I'm going to use the grey Mr. Surfacer 1500 on anything that's going to be an aluminium colour, and the brown Mr. Surfacer, that's a 1000, it's a bit coarse but it's still fine. The brown on that engine case, it's meant to be magnesium. There's no real logic behind that other than the silvers and the metallics we use are going to be quite close together in colour, so you can shift that colour a bit further over by using a different primer as a base coat, really. So that's why I'm using the brown on that, and magnesium is a sort of silvery brown colour anyway, so it just suits. It's just one of them things. I normally just prime in grey, but this one I'm not. But the one job that needs to be done before priming is to get rid of that seam on the back of the engine case, and I'm going to use super glue as a filler. But if you just use super glue itself, it's harder than the plastic, so when you're trying to sand it down, you tend to rock backwards and forwards over the super glue and eat into the plastic. So the question you're probably asking is, why am I using super glue? And the answer is speed. I can put a bit of super glue and talc in that, I can walk away, for 10 minutes. I'll probably go and have my lunch, come back, sand it back, and it won't shrink. Once it's there, it's there. So wherever you put in that is the bulk it's going to be. So when you sand it down, it's done. So you can get onto priming quite quickly. And I said talc. I've got some talc in this little jam jar, but it's Johnson's baby powder I'm using. But a word of caution now. I believe there's been talk of talc containing trace levels of asbestos, which that's not where our caution comes. Whether it does or not, it doesn't matter. But if you look at this, the ingredients are talc and part2, which is perfume, obviously. I think the modern baby powder and talcs are a corn flour or a starch, and they don't work with super glue. They'll set super glue in. This will almost act like a retardant for the super glue. The corn flour acts as a kicker and accelerates it, so you can only use pure talc, and I believe you can use French chalk, and VMS sell a super glue filler to replace talc, which was a cheap option when I bought that maybe 10 years ago. So yeah, if you're going to buy talc, have a look at don't buy it online, have a look at the ingredients, make sure it says talc, not cornstarch or whatever they use as a replacement powder for it. So we've got talc there, and we're going to mix that with super glue because basically it makes it softer. So when you're sanding, it's breaking down between the talc and the super glue. So when you come to sand that, it's similar consistency to plastic. It'll sand nicely. We'll get a good finish, and it'll have a nice feathered edge. So if it dries really quickly and it doesn't shrink and it sands nicely, why don't we use it all the time? Well, on something like this fairing where we got it, we could have used super glue and talc there, but the thing is it's quite brittle. So when we flex that to get it on the bike, it would have instantly cracked and we'd have a nasty scar. On something like this, which is a solid block that's never going to move, then we can put that on there because it's just going to bond itself to the surface, and that's got no movement in it, so there won't be any flex, so we won't get any cracking at a later date. The super glue I'm using, I just buy these little mini tubes from the supermarket. Really, if you buy anything bigger than that, it tends to go off in the jar anyway. So normally when we go shopping, I'll put a handful of them in and keep them lying around for when I need them. So how are we going to do this? Start with the talc first. So smells nice as well doing this, if I'm being honest. If we get a little heap of talc, and say if you can get some old Johnson's baby powder, old cheap talc, that jar will last you a lifetime. I'm going to mix a load up now, and we're going to use a fraction of that. It just lasts forever and ever. So don't. If you find anywhere, snap up a jar, a bottle of it, and it'll last you for a long time. So we'll get a little well there. Get our super glue. Lob that in. There's no real science behind this. I wouldn't get it done. On camera, am I? Yeah, just checking. I'm going to mix that all in nicely so we get a nice homogeneous gloop. We don't need any big lumps of talc in that will fall out when you're sanding and come back to haunt you. So you'll have to do the process twice, which you might do anyway, but say it's quick. You're not like using a normal filler where you're waiting for it to dry overnight. I'll be having a bit of peanut butter on toast, I think. Mainly because I just smelt someone else eating it in the house. By the time I've done that, this will be good enough to sand and spray over. So we've got a nice little blob of that there, and we'll just put that in there. So you don't have to overbuild it because you know it's not going to shrink, so we just want it in the right area. I'm not going to bother with this little bit on top of the engine mount. Well, why not? I wasn't going to because you're not going to see it, but let's do it anyway. And that will be enough. Can avoid anywhere where we've got a complicated shape to sand around. You're not going to see this, to be honest. It's going to be right at the back of the bike. and the rear wheel's going to spin around here, so it's going to be quite well masked. I think that's probably why they put the joint there. But that should do us. So that's all we need. That will set up. I mean, I've mixed it on a bit of masking tape on the desk, carefully doing that, because I always put my elbow in it, but that means we can also keep an eye on it and see when it goes hard, so we'll see that's hardened before we start sanding this. So I'll just leave that there and walk away. I'm going to have my lunch and I'll be back. I'll show you this when it's primed, and I'll show you it when it's sprayed, and then I think I'll probably put some of the bolt heads in and take a photo and use that as a thumbnail for the video. So it'll be a little while before this is up, but yeah, we're getting there. I did successfully snap one drill bit in there, but I got the bit out, luckily enough. I missed out a hole there. I did snap one drill bit when I was doing this, but that was kind of to be expected. I'd be surprised if I hadn't. So not the end of the world. I've had to go up a size to 0.5, but we'll still be able to drop all the bolts in there, so that's fine. So that's where we are. I'll be back when that's sanded and it's primed, show you it, get the aluminium bits sprayed up, then you can see what it looks like, and then I'll post this as a video. So thanks for watching. Bye. Okay, so we're back to the next bit. While I had lunch, that super glue was hardening, so I've rubbed that back now. It's probably not the best joint in the world, but say that's the back of the engine. At least it's not a gaping chasm that'll draw your eye. So I've mounted everything for priming on this little block I got from eBay. I've given it a good thrashing with my anti-static brush. This is a Tamiya brush, and I do find it knocks the dust off and keeps it off while you're painting. So they'll all be primed grey or the red brown. And while I've got the grey primer out, I'm just going to go over these joints on the seat cowl and the fairing, not to prime the whole thing. I just want to see if I still need to do any additional work on that, or whether I've filled that sufficiently. I suspect there'll be things, particularly around this area, which still need doing, but you can't really see it till you get the primer on. So I'm going to set up the spray brew now. I'll have a go at filming in there to see if I can, so you can see the primer go down and a bit of metallic, and I'll show you what metallic colours I'm using as I go. So I'll be back soon. Okay, so this is my first attempt at filming spraying. We're using the Mr. Surface of 1500 grey. I'm not giving a nice background for the silver when we come to do it, because I want a difference in tone between crankcase and the engine components, as I've said. So I'll be chopping and changing and editing bits of this, so you get an overview of what I'm doing, but you're not going to see much because I keep wandering off camera. I'm not used to this sort of angle. So we'll get a couple of these in primer so you can see it. Then I'll cut this short. I'll show the brown going on so you can see the difference of tone in the primer. Then we'll call it a day for spraying, and I'll come back and I'll show you the engine when it's sprayed silver on the next video. Then we'll do a bit more spraying with the camera set up properly. I just need a lot more time to set up what I'm doing, because it's not really working for me at the moment. So watch this bit. We'll go on to the brown bit, then that'll be an end. Okay, this is the crankcase being sprayed with the mahogany or sort of reddish brown primer. Again, because of the camera angle, I've wandered off camera far too much on this. So I'll show you how it all starts off, and I'll edit it to a bit where you can see the red brown, so you can see the difference in the primer colours. Then that'll show up when you look at the actual finished engine, the slight differences in tone all the way through. So it's not my best work, but we'll deal with it, and we will deal with how to set up my spray booth later on. So thanks for watching this bit. I'll do a little sum up at the end, I think, and then this is the end of the initial part of the engine video. So that'll cover that one in its entirety, and then next time you see it, the engine will be be together. There'll be some of the bolt heads in place, and we'll be playing with pin washers and things to try and bring it to life before we add some hoses, hose clips, and extra detail. So thanks for watching this, and sorry the spraying one is such a pig's ear. Thanks for sticking with it. Bye. Okay, so what we all agree was a disaster of a spraying video. That's the engine in its metallic colours. I think moving the light around makes it better or worse. So what we've got, it's all balanced together, and I've still got to put all the bolt heads in, which will be the subject of the next video. But it's a slightly darker colour in this magnesium area at the bottom than the cylinders and cylinder heads. When you see it in the video properly, the real light round it, you'll see that a bit better. It's not a huge difference, but we wanted a bit of subtlety and a bit of colour gradient. Didn't want to look like it was a zebra and be striped all over. So happy with that and the way it's gone. The bolts are going to take a little while to do, but I think the next video will be finishing off putting it together, detail painting little bits and pieces of it, starting to put some hoses and wires onto it, and pin washing areas to bring out the detail. So that's really what we've got to come forward to from that, and there may be some other bits and pieces to do along the line. The majority of the bolts I'll put in off camera, because that's going to be a pain to film, because my head will be really close to it, so you'll be looking at the back of my head mainly. So that's where we are. Where we're going forward to is putting a bit more detail into it, and hopefully next video the engine will be ready up to the point where it can sit in the frame. It'll still have to have things like clutch cables and bits and pieces added to it, but it'll be there as an entire lump, and we can see what we've ended up with. So thanks for sticking with this one. It's a bit experimental with the spraying, and that went horribly wrong, but I'm enjoying the build, and hopefully I can plow on with this and put up something every Friday or Saturday for the next few weeks. So thanks for watching, and thanks for all your support. Bye.